I might have had part to do with that. But anyway, let me ask you a question. How many people heard HetNet before yesterday? Is that a term you're all familiar with? Pretty good, 60, 70%. How many people could define it before yesterday? Yeah? Okay, well, we're all still working, I think, on that definition as we go through. And I guess the last question is, can anybody spell heterogeneous? But that's why it is the HetNet Forum. But we have a really distinguished panel today, and we're here to talk about the innovation roadmap. But in order to talk to what's coming, I think we're going to kind of clarify what is. But so before we go into the topics, I think I'd like to have the panel more or less introduce themselves. But to my right, I have Ronco with Cisco Systems, a tiny little company trying to break into the industry. Ron?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. Thanks for staying. Ronco. I look over the Cisco small cell solution, focused on licensed and unlicensed radio. On the licensed side, less than 250 milliwatts is kind of where we're playing. So I've certainly learned a lot here in the last 2 days, and appreciate everything. And believe me, Pico is not a curse word if he's out there somewhere. Anyway, that's me.
Sitting next to Ron is Derrick Smith, who manages the standards for the almighty ASG group at AT&T. Derrick, please introduce yourself.
My name is Derrick Smith. I'm the ASG Technical Standards Manager for handling primarily both DAS and small cell deployments for indoor. And I work at ASG.
Next to him is the DAS mogul from iBWave, Mario Bouchard. Mario, please.
What?
Mogul.
Wow. Mario Bouchard, co-founder and CEO of iBWave Solutions. We do a range of softwares, going from planning to mobile to, anyway, a lot of software suite for indoor, slowly outdoor as well. We'll, I guess, touch on that. We have customers in more than 80 countries. Good news is we're traveling all the time. We're seeing a lot of trends. We're seeing a lot of stuff in the market worldwide. So I guess we'll talk about that. And thanks for HetNet, because of my French accent, I can say the longest word I can't. So HetNet is fine.
Wonderful. And next to Mario, and last but not least, and the host for our party last night, Mark Reudink with Crown Castle, and I think we'll give Sandy some credit as well for planning the event. Mark?
Good morning. My name is Mark Reudink from Crown Castle. I'm the Director of Small Cell Solutions. My primary responsibility is putting on cocktail parties, although I think I'm branching out from that. So as you're probably aware, Crown has a number of assets between towers, rooftops, fiber, DAS nodes, and so my job is really to look at all the different assets we have to help provide solutions for the carriers, inclusive of Wi-Fi.
So again, if we had passed around a survey and asked everyone to fill in the definition of HetNet and what goes into that, and for that matter, small cell, I think we'd get roughly 280 different answers. Today, for our definition, a heterogeneous network, we're going to talk about licensed technologies, which we're all very familiar with. The macro is part of the HetNet, ultimately, but for our purposes, we're really not focused on the macro, but we are very focused on the DAS and the small cell. You get with some old grizzled veterans, I go back pre-divestiture, right? So I've seen them all come and go. There's fads and there's waves, and then there's niche technologies. I think the small cell, when you break it into the different components, are a number of niche technologies that are going to proliferate. And at noon or at 12:15, we've got Ian Gillot, who's going to show us all sorts of good charts and projections and try to help us get our arms around that some more. And then in the unlicensed networks, sort of more or less my background is a lot in the Wi-Fi areas. And for years I've had some good arguments. I've had some tremendous engineering talent at Mario's annual event in Las Vegas, which I believe is next week, yes?
Yep.
A tremendous event if you can make it, some of the smartest industry minds. But for most parts, going back at least 2 years, a lot of licensed bigots who were shooting down Wi-Fi, and I think that role has taken a much larger place in the network, and by definition, iBWave has added Wi-Fi to their mix. So my first question, I think, is since Mario has got this tremendous tool that most of the organizations here use, the small cell part of this next year?
Obviously, we don't have choice. This is, well, small cell. First of all, define small cell. Small cell right now is a big bucket of different technology. It's very trendy, a big buzzword like HetNet, like Sun. Nobody knows what it is, but really this is what people are shooting for. So yeah, small cell right now, the way it is, people will target lampposts, pretty much like we saw yesterday during the tour. So it's a mix of outdoor, it's a mix of indoor. If you think about the network of small cell outdoor, it's pretty much like indoor because it's antenna at lower heights than if you put an antenna here on the ceiling. It will cover a few hundred feet on the street. So really, and it's covering people sitting outside. So really, it's almost like an indoor site, but outdoor. So what we're doing for the tool is pretty much we will try to focus mainly on a few street and the building around, and trying to cope with indoor-outdoor propagation, outdoor-indoor interference, stuff like that.
So, in all reality, right, the small cell's not going to catch on if AT&T, Verizon, and Sprint aren't going to adopt that. Last week I presented at a rural telecommunications conference, a rural cellular conference. They now renamed it the Competitive Carriers Association. I asked the audience, the cellular providers, who's using Wi-Fi, DAS, and then small cell to lock down their largest enterprise customers in their territory. And not a single one of the rural carriers are using those technologies to lock down their customers. Yet we heard earlier from Chad Towns how AT&T is just really proactively going at that. So Derrick, how is small cell, I know you have a number of vendors in your labs, how is small cell going to roll out? We've all heard the 40,000 number. In building, out building, can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think from the standpoint of small cells and how it relates back to, I think you guys heard of our Project Velocity IP, where we're planning to spend over the next 3 or 4 years up to $8 billion on the wireless side just to enhance our networks to be IP-based. And going forward, like Chad mentioned this morning, when we look at our current customer base and where they're having a lot of issues, it's more so we've seen a lot more indoor issues being found as people are not able to use their devices indoors. So that's our target primarily for our small cell deployments. We're going to take a lot of those that we've identified as probably small enterprises like Peter mentioned in terms of ISCs and roll those out first, catch the low-hanging fruit, and roll those into our first set of builds that we'll have for small cell. Like Peter said, it's going to be probably, we're looking at doing, by the end of next year, 40,000 APs or access points out there with regards to small cells, and we're actively progressing toward that right now.
Okay, so to my right here I have Ronco, who's managing the small cell project at Cisco, and I think you've all been reading in the news all sorts of good acquisitions and et cetera. So Cisco's really building up the tool chest, which to me is always an indicator, right? That when there's a good technology and there's money to be made, Cisco goes out and not only uses their own technology, but buys other companies and builds a really robust ecosystem. So Ron, can you talk a little bit about where you guys are headed, specifically with what's existing? And I know you manage the Femto project with AT&T. Can you talk a little bit of how that's evolving and the capacity is going to grow on these things?
Absolutely, yeah. Cisco clearly has made a big investment in this space with the Inticel acquisition for SON capabilities to support HetNet, which will be a very critical component in order to allow it to operate and run, with the intention to purchase Ubiquitous, which is coming up, which is a software player in the space that rides on the small cell access points. Years ago we made a Starin acquisition, which provided a gateway that connects to the core and provides multifunctional capabilities for 3G, 4G, Wi-Fi in a single platform. So there's a lot of pieces that we have gone out and acquired, that we've built, that we've leveraged from our learnings deploying over 800,000 small cells in AT&T's network for residential. and applied that really to the overall space. When you look at Wi-Fi, obviously is a key component of that as well, and we've deployed 17 million enterprise Wi-Fis to date. So all of that is coming together, and Cisco is putting it all together with the acquisitions we've done and the in-house development we've done to evolve that.
Well, what I found impressive, kind of looking through the initial specs with Cisco, is you're going to combine that with your existing millions of deployed Wi-Fi, and there's a bolt-on unit now where the small cell can be brought into the Wi-Fi?
Absolutely. At Mobile World Congress this year, we announced a plug-in module that plugs into our existing enterprise Wi-Fi devices, the 3600 device that we have. So that will enable carriers initially, and that's where we're focusing right now, is working with service providers, but longer term enterprise owners to go from just providing Wi-Fi service to providing 3G and eventually 4G as well in that plug-in module. So quite a significant, like I said, 17 million devices deployed. We've got a significant deployed base out there, and that's going to provide opportunity to really enhance the overall consumer experience and deal with the license portion of the spectrum and the quality of service that's required there for voice and data services.
So Ron used one term, SON, which is the self-optimizing network, which is where we're really headed, right? I use the term son, who's sitting in the front row over here taking pictures. A 19-year-old, be nice to him, tell him his dad's a great guy. But that said, Mark Reudink, you guys are one of the leading neutral host providers. How is small cell, obviously you're directing that program, how is small cell going to roll into the neutral host program?
A couple of comments on the small cell and the challenges that we see today is really around the form factor, and that we're working with the OEMs and the carriers, of course, to define a small cell that will actually fit and be municipally friendly. I'm speaking more on the outdoor side versus anything on the indoor side. Currently, all the small cells and remote radio heads that are out there today would not fit in the structure that we saw last night during the tour. And so that's something that's really a large part of our initiative, because to be able to meet AT&T's demands and other carriers' demands to roll out 40,000 small cells or 100,000 across the next 5 years, we will need to work with the municipalities to be able to have zoning approval and get that quickly deployed. So from the Crown perspective, we have CLEC status in a number of different states, and be able to quickly deploy, leverage our existing infrastructure with the fiber assets and the antennas that are already placed up will enable us to roll out the small cell solution.
So actually you have more flexibility than our shot clock that our good association helped us establish for cellular. Because you're a CLEC, you actually have some more rights on those poles?
We may have some more rights, but we still run into very similar zoning issues and permitting issues. It's not just an easily throw them up there and good to go.
Well, you guys are very brave to take on the outdoor first, I would say, because one of the big challenges that we're all seeing is, it sounds like great technology, but if we're deploying it, we still need a backhaul mechanism. And in the outdoor world, what is that what is that backhaul mechanism? I mean, how are you guys going to tackle that?
Right, and one other comment before I leave the small cell topic and the challenges we see, and I'm sure Derrick can speak to this as well. The products out there right now are currently fairly low power, anywhere between 2 and 5 watts. And if you look at a typical outdoor repeater, dash repeater, they're 20 watts and oftentimes up to 40 watts. So a significant coverage delta. They're also single technology and single band. And so we look at deployments that we've done for AT&T as an example of Verizon. We're deploying 700, 850, 1900, 2100, and you can't replace that with a small cell today.
Okay,
so
excellent.
That's a significant challenge. Going back to your question regarding backhaul, right now the typical backhaul solution is fiber and using those fiber assets. We are doing some trials using some microwave and non-line of sight microwave solutions as well in conjunction with our carrier customer.
Okay, excellent. Since I've got the room full now, I'm going through we know who everyone is. Anybody not know these as household names in this industry is not paying attention. But you might not have heard of this little company called CCI Systems. We'll be real quick, but we're based in Iron Mountain, Michigan. We're not Crown Castle, although I wouldn't mind a few stock shares. We're not from New Jersey. We don't sell fiber arrays, so we've got some brand congestion on the CCI but we're headquartered in Iron Mountain. We build and design network systems. Our focus has largely been on high-density networks. We do a lot of work in the cable industry, building video head-end and providing video signal throughout properties. We deploy Wi-Fi as part of that solution in many hotels and chains of that sort. But that said, commercial's over. Thank you. But some of the directions we'll talk to some more, but I want to stay with small cell for right now. Well, actually, I want to skip by this and go to this one. So here's I stole this from Crown's competitor, American Tower. They were on one of these panels, and I thought, well, I don't know who they stole it from or if they did, but I thought it was really a good way, when you mentioned power and wattage, et cetera, to kind of help us frame the discussion, right? Ron, in residential, Ron, is that more or less right? We're at the 4 level, more or less 1 to 4 is really where you guys were, or 4 to 8?
Yeah.
Yeah. You talk about range, you talk about power, so really what we're talking about is number of simultaneous users, power, right, and distance. Pretty simple, just different boxes and different radios, right? So as you go along, we're really kind of emerging now into the pico micro world, as Ron said. Ron, you want to talk to where you guys are at? How do you fit in with this new offer?
Yeah, sure. So, you know, we segment the market a little bit differently, but I think one important line to add on there really is you know, the mode of operation, whether it be open mode or closed mode. So, for example, in AT&T residential, it's a closed mode environment, meaning you as a user have control of the device. And then typically in enterprise, it's an open mode environment, which allows anyone who can connect to the network to connect to it. You know, we kind of break it up a little bit differently from a segment standpoint, in that we look at residential, SMB, hotspot, enterprise, and then micro and macro. So that's kind of how we look at it. It fits into a lot of these buckets, but when you start talking about enterprise class femto, you're talking 16 to 32 user range on the 3G side, and then for LTE, it's going to be much more in that 32 plus users to support that. You know, strategically, Cisco's sweet spot, if you will, you know, we don't have any macro that we need to worry about. So we're very focused in the less than 250 milliwatt range of the game, which is really kind of from Pico down. You know, Pico 10 pounds, that's not too small, but typically it's a couple of pound device. If you look at our 3G module that was mentioned earlier, it's about 1 pound, and it's about 6-7 inches long. So
I don't need 4 cabinets to deploy this?
No, no. And I think really, and as I've listened to the discussions here over the last couple of days, I think one thing to recognize with these types of devices is these are extremely intelligent devices. They are, in essence, mini base stations. They have self-optimization capabilities within it. They can manage automatically the RF power levels based on interference and other things. So it's an extremely smart device. You know, the end device, it is what it is, but really you got to look at the whole picture from the access, from the edge through the access all the way to the core. And a critical overlay of that is really the provisioning platform. If you look at AT&T residential, for example, you know, I've seen numbers of greater than 97% of customers, Joe Blow customer who takes one of these devices, installs it in their house with zero touch, never a call. So that model needs to apply to enterprise as well. All of the OpEx involved with deploying other systems is part of the equation you got to look at when what is the right thing to deploy for the right use case, right scenario, right deployment.
Well, as an integrator, I'm a little bit concerned about my revenues here, but we'll let that go for today.
Okay.
Derrick, do you see, where do you see, you know, you guys use the term metro cell, I think I've heard a couple of times, or maybe that's just a piece of it. How is this going to fit for your network? I mean, are you trying, we heard the residential, right? But where are you trying to plug this in?
Well, I think, you know, piggybacking on a little bit that Ron said, you know, this is all going to be based upon what our customers need. And for us, small cell is going to be a tool in our tool belt. We're going to have, DAS. We're still going to have the macro, and we're now going to have small cells to complement those. And what it's going to mean is that we need to be able to integrate those all together in one heterogeneous network. I said the word, so. So it's all about making sure that we can get all those components to work and interact together. One of the key things that we found, some of our first installations up in Waukesha, Crystal Lake Park, is that we have to be able to integrate those small cells such that we have a seamless transaction going to and from the macro. And it's very key when you're talking about low power solutions like that and trying to put them in say, a high-rise building where you already have neg 65, neg 75 RCP in that facility, and trying to overpower it with a low power solution. That's where the innovation comes in, and this panel is talking about the innovation piece. And to me, that innovation piece is being able to do those things differently than what we've done before. As AT&T, rolling out our processes differently than we do for DAS when it comes to small cells, and being able to provide a seamless coverage for our users as they go in and out of these buildings where we want to deploy small cells. And with that too, we're also going to have to work along with the outdoor network, small cell and macro, to make that happen. So, from an AT&T perspective or ASG perspective, our goal is to make sure that we can deploy these small cells very efficiently, quickly, and that's another part that goes back to the transport piece that Mark was mentioned earlier. Understanding, where does the backhaul have to come from? Is it going to be something where we utilize another customer's IP backbone for our backhaul, or is it something that we're going to have to deliver ourselves?
You actually said, we were talking yesterday, and you said something I thought was very insightful. Derrick said, innovation is different than invention, and it's different than improvement. But somehow they all kind of play together, right? So I think that's where this stage we're at. We've got innovation, we've got new inventions every year, right? There's another technology and all that good stuff. And then ultimately we're just trying to improve the user experience. I think ultimately that's what this is all about. Mario, what are you seeing around the world? What's happening? I heard the fellow from SK in Korea kind of question the way we go about things here in North America. What are you seeing around the world in this field?
Actually, I haven't seen too much innovation for the last 24 months. I think innovation, like I said, it's a lot of buzzword. I've been hearing small cell all around the world. It's actually slowing down the rollout because people are waiting for that magic pill. DAS too expensive, I'm going to wait for that magic pill, but the magic pill doesn't exist. Small cell, we don't see a lot of rollout. So people are not rolling that out. They're just keep doing, US, you see a lot of active DAS. Asia, it's still passive. They're all running cables. So I'm not seeing too much innovation. I think innovation will come from HetNet, so the real connection between different technology. We've been, when I'm saying this is a lot of different invention. Some of them don't work. So femto, I was at those femto forum like 6 years ago with projection of skyrocketing every year. I don't know anybody who has one. So raise your hand if you have a femto. Exactly. All right. So we have
the Sprint guys got one.
We have a guy. In Korea, all right.
Korea, no good. Yeah, all the carrier guys got them. I guess it came with your bonuses.
So if you look at who's pushing the technology, is the people who are putting money into it. So the Cisco guy and the Ubiquitous, a lot of venture capital money, and they need to recoup that money, right? But if you look at the user himself, why should I buy one? So that's the. If you look at the market is actually dictating what we're using. Mm-hmm. BlackBerry is dead, Windows Mobile is dead. It's iOS and it's Android. 90% of the shipment in 2012, those two companies. So phone, we solved that part. Competition between CDMA and wideband CDMA is out. competition between LTE and WiMAX. WiMAX out. So now we have what? LTE, we have Wi-Fi. Femtocell, pretty much out as well. I'm sorry, I'm very bold, but
I love it.
Man, I'm gonna have to challenge that one.
That's the trend. Like, we're looking at the trend, right? So the trend is what people are using and what they want to pay for it.
I'm looking for the boxing gloves.
So
Wi-Fi and LTE are pretty much where I see the edge for the future. HetNet will be a combination of those technology, better Wi-Fi. So we'll, move ahead with 802.11 AC probably, because spectrum, speed, quality, better standard. But this is 2 hours ahead. So
I want to get there, but before I get there, I see two fellas that are chomping. I think you only put out, what, 4 million of these things? Is it 4? I forget the numbers, but Ron, go ahead. Take them on.
Okay, well, I'll first say, just to distinguish, right? So femtocell in my mind, and this is the problem, right? Definition, right? At the end of the day, it's an all of the above solution, right? There's not any one that is gonna overbear. So, but femtocell is traditionally considered residential. And I would agree that on the residential side, the business model, every carrier has a different way of how they want to look at the business model and how they expect to get that return on that investment, right? There's some carriers that say, you know what, I'm just giving it to every single customer that is possible to reduce churn, to improve coverage, et cetera, et cetera. There's other carriers globally that say, hey, I'm going to give it to everyone, and I'm going to create a small cell layer with these small devices that can support 4 or 8 users. And then there's other business models of, hey, I'm going to sell it, I'm going to recoup the money, I'm going to invest in it. So on the residential space, it's a challenge relative to the business model and how the carrier wants to deploy it. There has to be a payback. But when you get above the residential, the femto, the 4 user, and you get into SMB, you get into enterprise, you get into venue, the business case is quite compelling, and it solves a lot of the challenges that are out there. So has it taken off? Maybe it's been hyped in the past? Maybe not, but it's definitely happening now. I mean, we are seeing so much activity globally from operators that want to deploy it and intend to deploy it and are finally putting their money where their mouth is.
Derrick, do you want to chime in there?
And I also want to chime in also. When you think about where all this came from in terms of small cells and their evolution, you got to think about, where we were in the beginning, right? We started off, from AT&T perspective, we started off with TDMA, GSM, UMTS, now LTE. There's only so much that you can do from a technology perspective. And then there's also so much you can do from an infrastructure perspective. And hence, that's where all this came from, is being able to, produce smaller coverage areas, smaller areas to cover, to maximize the number of people that you're impacting. And from a residential standpoint with femto, I don't really see that going away anytime soon, because right now a lot of our focus is going to be more so on in the larger cities, larger areas, urban areas, suburban areas, where those residential customers in the rural side will still need to be covered via small cell, via femtos, and have that coverage there. And I also want to talk about, what Mario was mentioning earlier. You can only talk about technology in terms of innovation. Technology is a piece of it, but then there's also the operational piece. So the operational piece, you also have to be innovative in that as well. And we found that, with rolling out our small cell product, that we have to be able to do things differently, not just not do the things that we've done before better, but we have to be able to do something different and make that change to impact the timelines that we have to roll these things out by the end of 2014.
Okay, and Mark, you want to comment as Director of Small Cell at Crown Castle?
Sure, I'll make a quick comment on more of the worldwide observations that we've seen. And it might surprise some people in the room that the U.S. is actually far ahead of the rest of the world on LTE deployments, which I was not aware of, but we actually are leading that charge. And I think that's part of the challenge where you see the small cell development from the OEMs and where they stand. That isn't their priority right now. They're still addressing the rest of the world. What we see also is there's a significant adoption of using Wi-Fi as capacity augmentation worldwide that we don't see here yet. Part of that's driven by standards, and then we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But really, I think what we'll start to see is more QoS-driven or quality of service-driven integration between Wi-Fi and the licensed band technologies as we start to move forward. And certainly, as we've talked with the Cisco marrying Wi-Fi and licensed band technologies into a single unit will play a part of that, as well as really the back end, which all the major manufacturers are working on, of how do I steer the user to the correct technology to provide the best quality of service for that end user.
Okay. All right, so we talked about small cell a lot, and at lunch we're going to have Ian, so I think maybe we'll talk about some of the other technologies in the HetNet. Mario referenced Wi-Fi and the AC standard. You know, if we look at that on a residential play, right, AC is going to put us in the gigabit world, which is basically going to mean that we're going to have far faster access here in this building. We're going to have far faster access at home, and then it's going to hit that last mile, which is your cable connection or your internet connection. How many people have 100 megs at home? Yeah, that's right. 10 megs? Right. Oh, okay, we got a couple, right? So you're going to have your Wi-Fi will give you a gigabit, but then you're going to hit that pipe, right? So there's a lot of stumbling blocks. So really the larger organizations are really going to take advantage of this. You're going to see it really at the SP, the service provider level, right? So we need to distinguish. We talked residential, we've talked a little bit about enterprise, and then really the service provider, which I think Cisco does a very good job of defining the markets and breaking them down that way. You want to talk a little bit about sort of the view for a service provider that Cisco sort of sees in the whole ecosystem? That's fair?
I lost track with you there, but...
okay. In other words, you've got all these various technologies, right? And we talked femto at the residential side. But really, the capacity, you know, coverage is important, but capacity is critical in the service provider network now.
Right.
How do you plan to tackle that with the multiple technologies?
Right. So, you know, we segment it similar to what I heard here, even with DAS, with a service provider driven deployment to solve their capacity and coverage challenges, and then the enterprise segment, a hospital, airport, anyone else who wants to provide the service, right? So we kind of segment it similar to what I heard on the DAS side. On the service provider side, you know, it's really about partnering with folks like AT&T and Time Warners and Comcasts and Sprints and everyone else out there to provide an end-to-end solution that can be deployed in hotspot scenarios and enterprise scenarios to solve the offload, the data offload problem. The issue, and someone mentioned it yesterday, this data tsunami that is out there, right? Obviously, voice is critical. You need license for that. But for handling this capacity and offload requirement, Wi-Fi is the solution to do it today. We've got 18 million, 17 million devices deployed that support that. It's working with folks like AT&T to get that deployed at an overall solution level. And again, we consider Wi-Fi small cell. That's how we look at it. Whether it be licensed or unlicensed, it's small cell, less than 250 milliwatts is kind of how we define it. But you have to have the end-to-end solution to really provide the capabilities that are smart. Even you look at the Wi-Fi segment deployed with service providers, we've got a number of smart technologies, Clean Air, Hotspot 2.0, other capabilities that help optimize its overall deployment and minimize the OpEx deployment cost. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
I think that was very helpful.
I think I rambled long enough.
You'll get a couple extra bucks for that.
All right.
Derrick, you know, a couple years ago, it was sort of a bad thing, unlicensed technology. You can't control it, et cetera, right? AT&T's been very aggressive. I'm an AT&T user, just to remind you guys, so next order, please. But I have my phone set to just find AT&T Wi-Fi, right? I'm not a video user on my device. That's my tablet, but I mean, I'm not that dense, but I let the network define it for me, right? And there's I find it all the time. Explain that strategy a little bit and where it's going.
Well, from a Wi-Fi strategy, I'm not the SME in terms of being able to define what we're going to do at AT&T, but I can tell you from our typical DAS deployments, we typically try to look at how can we maximize any type of Wi-Fi offload in facilities like what Chad presented earlier today, like at the Superdome. One of the things that I think going forward is going to be real key is, how do we, get users to automatically be engaged on the Wi-Fi network as opposed to them physically having to do something on their phone themselves to get on those networks. And that's where the Hotspot 2.0 and some of the enhancements with the U standard is coming into play. Generally, we always define our capacity, especially in some of our larger venues, for us to support all the traffic that we need to. And then the Wi-Fi, if it supports it or if it handles a certain portion of it, then that's just a relief from us on the network side, so that we don't under-dimension the network, but also maintain that working interaction with the Wi-Fi network.
Okay, so Mario, from what I know, your tool is the only one out there that really incorporates both the licensed DAS technology and the unlicensed Wi-Fi. I recently worked on a project where they wanted it was about a $2 million Wi-Fi installation, about a $4 million DAS installation, and the venue wanted the DAS to fund the installation of the Wi-Fi. So it was a neutral host environment, but I'll get to that second. But first, do we plan these together? Do we overlay the whole RF environment in that stadium and through your tool? And what are the considerations, perhaps, at looking at both those technologies?
Well, obviously, and I remember a few years back, we were actually fighting again, mobile versus Wi-Fi, and really two camp. Even in our tool, we're not doing Wi-Fi at that stage because it was really two camp. Now I think the two worlds are bridging together, and obviously there's no winning camp because even if a lot of cellular people hate Wi-Fi, I'm sorry to say that, but it's true. Wi-Fi is there to stay. There's a billion devices doing Wi-Fi. My mom, when she's asking me what are you doing, I'm saying I'm working in wireless. Oh yeah, Wi-Fi. She knows Wi-Fi. She can connect to it. But she knows Wi-Fi. Everybody can connect to LTE, but they don't know what it is because it's 4G. But those two worlds are actually collapsing. I think on the software side we are one of the standard platform. On the Wi-Fi side, there's other software platform like AirMagnet, which are the standard. So actually, we are working with them to, see how the two standard can bridge and use the best use of both to benefit the ecosystem.
Interesting. We own both of them, so that'd be interesting. Yeah. Maybe we can get a discount. Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah, from them.
Yeah. Mark, as I mentioned, there was this one neutral host bid, big stadium, and we had about $6 million worth of technology on the table, and they wanted it for free, and then they wanted a kickback of about 10 grand a month for the privilege of providing this service to their customers. Right? What's happening out there, Mark?
Yeah, that's a challenge I think that we were talking about earlier today, and also we're continuing to see some of that, but I think it's tailing off a bit where the venue owners are becoming more educated about the type of services they can provide over Wi-Fi and do realize that it's not free, especially within the large stadiums and whatnot, where you can get additional analytics, provide advertising, ordering to your seats, instant replays. And it's really more compelling to bring more people into the stadiums. Not every stadium filled or is at capacity during each one of the events. It's much more comfortable for me to sit in my living room, watch TV, have a beer that's $1.50 versus go to a stadium. But if I can get additional services such as what's happening on the bench, can I overhear what the coach is saying to his players by only going to the stadium, that's being driven by Wi-Fi. And this part of it also comes back into how do the licensed band and unlicensed bands play together. and it's a challenge that we're currently addressing.
Yeah, I mean, if we had more time, I'd go down that path of the apps and the location-based services that are evolving. Some of them are sort of a mystery, but they're slowly creeping in, and that fan experience is hearing that more and more. The marketing departments are getting involved, not just the technology departments. So it's pretty interesting. I want to come back now to kind of our old brand, or old name, the DAS Forum, and one of the technologies, I know Corning's outside, and I think CommScope's out there as well, and we've heard of a number of others. But I'm starting to hear the buzz that we're going to go all fiber to the antenna on a DAS. Where does that stand, Mary? Is that around the corner, or is that, and what will it do, or do you know?
Well, I know Corning is launching something. I think CommScope is launching something as well. Solid is driving the industry on fiber. We're saying, well, that's my personal opinion. I think the future, especially because we need to bring a lot more than just mobile, plus the Wi-Fi, plus the video camera, plus probably fiber will be the best medium to carry all that stuff rather than just the Cat5 or. But at the end, the goal is to bring as many RAN access possible everywhere and connect them together. So.
Derrick, is there a perspective on that? Obviously, you guys are in the front line. I don't want you to give up trade secrets, but are you starting to hear more and more about that? And is it something you guys want to see?
Yeah, we have, and the ease of implementation of it is going to be what's going to drive, I think, the growth of that, or be able to drive the growth of that. I know through our project Velocity IP, we've talked about looking at how we do like fiber to the home and fiber to the nodes to try to make that a lot easier. However, in terms of the implementation, it's going to require a lot more planning.
I wish Scott Simone from Verizon was here. He certainly has a future in stand-up comedy, but I wonder what his perspective on this and what tools he'd want me to have on my belt. But
fiber is really a U.S. play right now. When I'm traveling and I'm talking about fiber, I almost got killed in Asia. People don't like it.
Really?
They're very vocal about it, and it's still a passive play. So, the U.S. has put a lot of marketing money behind fiber. I think, and it's working. I'm not saying fiber is not good. I think fiber is it's the next, or this is the way to do the future, but it's not a worldwide play for sure. And maybe it will become, but there's a lot of education to do worldwide.
Okay. Mark, for your benefit, is there a benefit for an all-fiber DAS? Or?
I definitely see, and as Mero mentioned, what we see not only is the need, especially on a stadium side, to be able to plug in a DAS network into the fiber backbone that you're putting in, but these additional services as well. So you're connecting up into switches for the high-speed Wi-Fi access. It can be video cameras and other functions that you're trying to control through that infrastructure that you're putting in place. So rather than putting different types of cabling in there, if it's a single bundle that you're putting in with fiber, that makes a lot of sense to us.
Okay. I see 2 out of 3 AT&T people texting and doing email over here. Is Jim Parker in the room? Jim is my co-chair on market development here at the HetNet Forum, but I guess he's carrying Chad's bags to the car, maybe, yeah? Okay. Jim's a very good friend, okay? I'm going to go to his wedding. Give me a break. Okay. Now I have to give him an extra present, but in any case, let me turn it around to the audience here. Folks, any questions out there? There's a number of topics we've touched on, and there's a few more slides, but I think given the density of these topics, maybe we'll stay right where we're at. Any questions out there? No? Ken, you want to do a plug for Solid? No. Okay, well then we'll come. I thought you would.
I'd like to understand the priorities from an in-building perspective on roaming, right? I know we're talking about Wi-Fi, licensed to unlicensed roaming, being able to hand off back and forth, which, certainly is important potentially. The voice handoff versus data handoffs. And then also, there seems to be a lot of emphasis placed on, I walk from in the building to out of the building. I can understand a voice handoff, but how critical is a data handoff in terms of how smooth that is, given that I'm not going to see the interruption, right? I'm going to be out, and then I'm going to be in, and then be back again, and I'm not really going to care that I lost connection for 10 seconds, you know? So kind of like to get your perspectives on that roaming perspective. Now, clearly, if the whole building inside is all a bunch of small cells, I'd want to be able to walk around the building and stay connected with voice and data, but that's a given. I'm just curious on how you guys view the roaming part.
Derrick, you want to jump in?
Well, I think from a handover perspective, like you mentioned, when we talk about roaming, it's all about, well, let me first say this. I don't think there are any true standards right now with the roaming piece, but I think they are looking at how do you develop those. But going back to what you were talking about in terms of the perception that the end user has, that's where you really try to understand what they're doing. If you're doing some kind of interactive background type application where you're not really worried about the latency or delay, then yeah, you really wouldn't be concerned with it. But if you're continuously doing stuff like streaming media, something that's more intensive, then it may impact you. I mean, you may end up missing that one key point, or it has to take a long time to either buffer. So those are the things that I think, you know, from a roaming side, we have to kind of look at understanding how it's going to impact the user and understand what the user performance impacts are going to be from a roaming perspective.
Go ahead.
I'll add a little bit. Not much on the roaming piece per se, but you know, if I'm on a Cisco WebEx and I walk out of my house and I'm looking at a presentation on my iPad, I want to continue to see that presentation. So I think what it comes down to, and one of the key things that will be required for HetNet to succeed, is really intelligent access selection, right? It should be very seamless to the end user. You should be able to hand in, hand out, hand over both voice and data seamlessly. You know, that's the holy grail, right? Getting there is a little bit harder. Hand in, hand over is a bit easier to solve. Hand out involves a lot of macro integration and interaction to make that happen. And that's where, at least in our view, SON and the acquisition we did with Intercell will really help with that, to allow for real-time data collection to help drive from a centralized location some of those decisions, and provide information relative to neighbor list and things along those lines to help make that be more seamless.
I actually have the opposite opinion, because what I'd like to see happen is a session drop as somebody walks out the door so they don't run into me while they're staring at their phone walking down the sidewalk.
When I'm on a WebEx in my car, I mean, come on.
well,
there you go.
You know,
more importantly,
no
texting
and driving.
Exactly. No WebExing and driving.
Yeah.
Well, the good news is you'll have your Google
Absolutely.
glasses on shortly
go.
while you drive, right? So you'll never get lost, but what you'll hit, I don't know. But one other technology that's sort of on the innovation cusp, MIMO's not brand new, but we're going 2x2, 3x3, 4x4. What's going on there, and is there a real benefit to get to 4x4? Is it necessary? Can I get an opinion maybe from Mario first, Mr. Design?
Obviously, you know, they invented the technology, you know, it's working. It's working. I think there's a definition of working in a lab and working in real life, you know. We've seen in different trials around the world that even if you install MIMO, it doesn't really kick in all the time because you know, either the design is not, or the density of antenna is not high enough. Mm-hmm. So if you have a low density of antenna and you put MIMO, you're not in a good condition for MIMO to kick in. So you don't really benefit from MIMO. So it's actually a waste of money to invest if you don't plan it the right way. So so again, it's all coming back to what the gentleman this morning from AT&T was saying. You know, it's a return on investment. You know, if you think you have enough capacity with CISO, you know, don't invest in MIMO for nothing.
Is there a standard there with AT&T? Do you have specs that we should know about?
we have standards relative to our different verticals and how we deploy MIMO versus CISO, or SIMO. But overall, we've seen in some cases with studies that we've done, up to 60% increase going from SIMO to MIMO under certain situations and certain, RF environments, thinking about the SINAR that's required.
Would that be like a healthcare environment that you're looking at for something like that, or?
No.
Okay. Oh, good. Thank you. Please.
Hello. Youngie Kim from SK Telecom. I think one of the panelists said that market dictates the technology, architecture, and business models. What kind of trends do you think will drive the need for neutral host HetNet deployments? What type of trends or market need will drive the need for, or is there a need for neutral host HetNet deployments?
Well, it sort of sounds teed up pretty well from Mark here. I'm going to take a crack at it first. Here, definitely in the United States, capital is king, right? So there's a lot of scenarios. I heard 2 yesterday that may be ripe for some neutral host, because ultimately that expense is huge, and if it's shared, right? But Mark, maybe you can expand on that?
Sure, I can talk about that a little bit. And I think one of the challenges that we run into, and we're still in the process of defining what a HetNet means, if you look at the integration of a macro cell versus a DAS network and a small cell, and the infrastructure that you can provide, if you call that the neutral part, the steel on the tower, the rooftop, etc., then certainly that's a great neutral host play. Now, if you take that one step further and talk about sharing electronics and things of that nature, I think that's a long way off in the US. I know that there's some network sharing happening in Europe and the UK, but I don't see the radio and the licensed frequencies being shared by the carriers. I don't know if Derrick's shaking his head. Then that's not going to happen.
Yeah, well, one other thing I can add on to from our perspective is we've actually looked at how do we maybe utilize and also small cells to drive a neutral host DAS scenario where you have different carriers plugging their own small cell, driving a neutral host DAS, but that's still a long way out. And there's some also technical reasons why you may or may not want to do that, specifically looking at some of the sound features and functionalities that may be impacted by it.
And just to follow on briefly, when we deploy our outdoor DAS networks, typically the electronics on the pole are not shared by any of the carriers. And that's due to the power requirements that the carriers have and also the ownership of the equipment. In building, it's a different scenario, but on the outdoor side, there's very little sharing.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're coming up on the hour. Maybe one more question, if there is one. Okay.
I have one.
Uh-oh.
Because the OEMs don't share their business cases with me. Do you expect that there will be a multi-carrier, multi-technology small cell on the market that's not 800 pounds anytime soon?
No.
No, I can't say it anytime soon. I think if there are any type of solutions like that, it's going to be something that's 5-7 years out, probably.
Yeah, I would.
Why no, Mark?
I would agree. It's not, because if you even look at what we have as far as small cells today, even the roadmap for the next 18 to 24 months is still very limited, and it's maybe a dual technology, LTE, UMTS, single band. So to have a multi-band solution out there within the next 5 years, I think is highly unlikely.
Do you jump straight
for the U.S. market? At least.
Do you jump straight to a remote radio unit type of?
Potentially jump straight to remote radio heads.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'd hope to stimulate a good argument here, maybe a little bit of a tiff, but not so much. I think I'm only going to be arguing with Jim Parker's fiance later. But in any case, we're coming up on the hour, so why don't we start with Mark. Any final thoughts that you'd like to deliver?
Sure. I think one of the things that we're definitely seeing is this move towards a capacity augmentation with using Wi-Fi. Crown as well as AT&T are very active participants in the Wireless Broadband Alliance, and we're keeping an observation on what's happening in the rest of the world, and we'll see that moving in this direction too. And I think that'll have an impact on some of the planning tools and the integration of Wi-Fi capacity planning, where it's not just I'm on the license band, then I get shifted over to Wi-Fi, and then I'm lost on Wi-Fi. Being able to move those back and forth, which will also impact, I think, the carriers and how many BTSs they need to deploy if they know that there's a solid carrier-grade Wi-Fi behind the license band DAS that they've deployed.
Okay, terrific. Mario, please.
Well, I think I'll talk about HetNet. So the real definition of HetNet is actually having multiple RAN access all connected together, being able to measure the quality of each and make sure that you're sending your user, depending on what they're doing, on the right one. So if I have a guy doing video, I'll send it to Wi-Fi, and if I got a guy doing email on a legacy BlackBerry, I'll send them to maybe HSPA or so. But the goal is to be able to bring him back. So that's your point. So when I'm done with my YouTube video on Wi-Fi, I'm coming back, and I know that the user has a good quality of service. So in terms of you were mentioning planning, so that's one thing that we're working is try to map all the different technology at one location and understand the different KPIs from each, just to make. Microphone is down, right?
He didn't like what you had to say.
Yeah, I know. But that's the real future. Try to interconnect all those technology together, and make sure that you're gonna have end-off, and all the user will use the right RAN access for their use. But this will be in 2-3 years from now.
Yeah, the mic's right there.
Hello?
Hello.
Yeah, Derrick, final thoughts?
You know, I think from AT&T perspective, our goal is to make sure that we get a heterogeneous network that can work and provide our customers with whatever activities they want to do with their devices. So if that means, you know, deploying DAS, small cells, you know, other solutions to do that, then that's what we need to do via Wi-Fi, licensed spectrum, unlicensed spectrum. And it also means that we have to be able to work well with our vendors, such as Cisco, such as iBWave, Crown, to make that happen for our customers. So it's going to be a collaborative effort to be able to do that, and that's what AT&T is looking to do.
Mr. Ron?
All right. Well, I think a lot.
Dead too, so.
I think a lot of good things set up here today. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, I think at the end of the day, it's kind of a all of the above solution. As Derrick mentioned, what will be critical is that everything plays and works together and delivers the proper end user experience to customers, right? Longer term, you know, so much of the focus today is on coverage and capacity and solving that problem, right? Obviously, a huge data crunch in play, but over time, and we're starting to see it now, it's how do you monetize that, right? How do you take all of that intelligence pouring through the network and leverage that to monetize it? You know, so that you can push targeted ads to mom saying, hey, we've got apples for sale in the aisle that you just happen to be in. So that's out there. That's maybe scary to some, but ultimately there's a ton of dollars, if you will, in the data that can be leveraged to monetize it in a very private way. So thank you.
And my final thoughts are, you know, as a group, we spend a lot of time talking about access technologies, and we all do pretty well in our industries building those access technologies. One thing that we got to focus on more, and Ron just kind of more or less hit on that, is you go deeper into this network, there's a whole nother layer. There's the core layer, there's the cloud layer, and there's a whole lot of smart work that's got to be done there to enable these technologies. And while somebody said DAS is more or less a dumb technology yesterday, it just moves the signal through. You're going to find these networks providing more and more information, and in fact, you know, they might be defined by this information. Your life will be correlated with everything you do on these devices through the network. So I think as we evolve, I think we're going to see more and more discussion around deeper than just that physical access layer and the basic physics of getting there. So I want to thank you all for giving us this time. Thank you very much.